Okay, I'm going to call the hearing to order, and just ahead of time, Mr. Secretary, as I'm sure you're aware, we'll have a lot of members coming in and out because we've got an awful lot of hearings going on this morning. I know we'll be joined later by we like to call him the big chairman, will be here, and at that point, just so everybody knows, when he comes in, I will allow, once we finish whoever's questioning at that point, certainly go to the chairman immediately, allow him to make any statement he wants to make, certainly do the same thing for Ms. Loy if she has a statement she cares to make when she arrives. So good morning, Mr. Secretary, and welcome. I want to thank you for your service to our country and certainly the administration, and want you to know this committee recognizes the demanding role you have at a very difficult time. I appreciate your work on behalf of the American people. We may have some areas where we disagree, but I certainly appreciate the effort and the commitment and compassion you display in your job. For the first time in many years, we've had some encouraging news on headline unemployment numbers, but the data belie the challenges faced by the long-term unemployed and by involuntary part-time workers, who I know you have concern with both those categories. Improvement in the unemployment data is also due in part to labor participation rates that remain at the lowest level in many decades. For too many Americans, the Great Recession doesn't feel over. Equally concerning is that despite the recent improvement in unemployment data, job openings continue to rise. There were 5 million job openings at the end of January, the highest level in 14 years. And in some ways, of course, that's good news. But despite billions of dollars the federal government invests in job training each year, the skills gap continues to grow. Employers can't find enough qualified candidates to fill the jobs they have, while millions of Americans remain unemployed and underemployed. This indicates to me that there are some real structural deficiencies in the workforce training system, and I'd like to hear your view on those during the course of our hearing. I would also like to cover a lot of subjects at today's hearing. Mr. Secretary, your budget far exceeds any realistic caps on spending. While you may have the luxury of proposing increases for virtually every program, we likely won't have the ability within our allocation to meet all those requests. With proposed increases across the board for the Department of Labor, I'm having some difficulty in determining exactly what your priorities are, so I'd certainly like you to make those clear to us today. I'd also like to discuss the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, which Congress overwhelmingly passed last summer. A good example of bipartisanship, quite frankly. The committee's excited about many of the improvements that WIOA makes to workforce training programs. However, I am concerned the department is missing statutory implementation deadlines and delaying the benefits this reauthorization might make to millions of Americans. Finally, I'd like to ask about the department's regulatory agenda along several lines. I've got questions about the regulatory process that the department's following. For example, you're developing a respirable silica rule that's relying on a small business advocacy review completed more than a decade ago, even though industries that will be impacted by the rule have changed significantly since that time. Nothing's more important than worker safety, but I want to make sure we're using the latest information that we have, and so your thoughts in that area will be deeply appreciated. And I have some questions about the timing of your regulations. For example, the home health care rule being implemented now seems contrary to policies many of us have supported to encourage goals like aging in place and home care for people with disabilities to help reduce health care costs and improve the quality of life for millions of Americans. Finally, Mr. Secretary, I'm deeply concerned that the Department has stopped processing H-2B visas in the wake of a recent court ruling, although I understand you may have some news for us and a recent filing in your testimony. I'd be delighted to hear that, because I know there's a bipartisan concern. To avoid significant economic losses to thousands of seasonal businesses ranging from seafood harvesting and horse training to amusement parks and stone quarries, the Department of Homeland Security should immediately issue an emergency rule to allow the resumption of H-2B processing, and the Department of Labor could continue to participate in a consultative role in the program. I want to be assured the Department's pursuing every recourse in order to restart the H-2B visa program as soon as possible. Thanks again, Mr. Secretary, sincerely for being here. I'd now like to yield to my good friend, the ranking member, for any comments she cares to make.